This property is a very good example of two different sources of water. One is damp-proofers condensation, where you've got two different forms of building material, one impermeable, one permeable, and the vapor is becoming trapped between the two. And the other is where you've got penetrating damp from the outside. In this case, where the recent painting of brick wall is causing the moisture to become trapped within the brick and not evaporate out, but instead coming in.
That got really this bad. This one we've been doing repairs thinking that we knew what it was.
What did you think it was then?
Yeah, I mean, my husband's probably better too, but he definitely, I don't know, he asked for some guys to do some work. Don't ask me what they did. I don't know. But for example, we definitely had it here.
When you first moved in, there was no sign. There were no salt crystals.
Nothing for like.
And that was what, 3 years ago? Did you say?
No, 6 years ago.
6 years ago.
So I would say for a good 6-8 months, nothing.
Yeah.
Then we definitely had it here, and something was done around this area because I remember the wardrobe used to be all the way down here, and then we moved it to do the repairs, and then we never took it back because we thought, oh my god, I don't know, whatever. So that repair for some reason worked in here, and so then we did the same when it happened here, but then this one just kept coming and coming and coming. So yeah, that's why this has been a bit of a mystery going on all over the years.
So obviously I don't know what replacement, but I'm actually going to hazard a guess that it's thermal, well, it's plasterboard of some sort.
Yeah.
With probably a vapor barrier behind it. Well, it doesn't seem to be insulation because the heat, the thermal properties aren't different, but it's the same. The idea is you can see it's horizontal, the line of dampness, and this is about 1.6 meters. So it's way more than rising damp could ever rise, and this is obviously dry and this is damp, and it's the interface between an impermeable material such as vapor barrier and a permeable wall, and the vapor is absorbed in here. It can't evaporate out of here, and this area becomes dampest. Obviously it's sort of just getting it. It's a bit like, so the analogy is a overcoat compared to a plastic mac. The plastic mac you sweat in underneath. With an overcoat, it evaporates out.
Yeah.
And if water gets in underneath, it sweats, and obviously it's not actual sweat; it's damp-proof as condensation. So you can see the line of condensation there. Looking through a thermal imaging camera where blue is about 5 degrees colder than red, you'll notice the colours are constantly adjusting. That's because it's a relative temperature. Interestingly enough, you can actually, funnily enough, you can see hygroscopic salts outside, but they're not affecting this wall. It may have been the excuse for putting in the slurry in the first place, but they're not affecting this wall. You wouldn't have these salts. These are calcium sulfate salts that are blistering. So the cause of this dampness is past damp proofing treatment, which has come up to this level, and it's damp proof as slurry, and you get a problem between the original plaster and the damp proof as slurry. It isn't coming from the outside. If it were, which it isn't, you would see a brown stain, and this is just standard damp-proof as slurry condensation. I'm going to encourage you to get one of these damp meters. You have to put it onto masonry level, so that means moving this along, and then what you want to do is measure different areas. So choose the same spot maybe mark it, and then just see how my recommendations reduce the damp issues. So you'll see it's going down here, but that's because the slurry is stopping the damp from showing, but instead it's showing up here. As I say, it's damp proof as condensation. It doesn't create the condensation, it just makes it worse. It makes it worse because if you think this wall can no longer absorb moisture in the air as vapor, so that you don't get the buffering benefit. We'll see on the outside that there are a lot of reasons why you're getting it, as well as on the inside, but it is essentially it's a condensation issue made worse by damp proofing treatment. So there are 4 primary sources of vapour in a property. There's vapour from the bathroom, which accounts for about half a litre per person per shower. There's vapour from drying clothes, which is about another half a litre per person per day. There's quarter of a litre from cooking, which can vary a lot depending on cooking styles, and your kitchen extractor fan is not going out. And there's 3/4 of a litre from respiration, which obviously has been made worse by working from home during COVID. All of these have to be compensated for by either ventilation or dehumidification. I'm going to go into the other room. So you've got heat loss up at the top there. This is the dining room, and they're getting condensation down there. If you look at the floor, the feels quite nice and warm on the floor. It's presumably some sort of underfloor heat. Let's go to the rear room. So to the rear of the property we have a couple of damp issues. One is actually old here. There's no high damp meter reading. And the second is to the rear of this bedroom, where you're getting brown stains. That's a sign of penetrating damp, water coming through the wall. And this continues to be very damp. And I will show you what's happening to that. So just to explain what I'm doing here, I'm using a radio frequency damp meter. That is a damp meter using radio waves to reflect off density within the brick wall. It's set at a frequency that responds or resonates with water. I typically concern myself with numbers that show 999. That means that the wall is saturated. Below 300 is dry. Often you will have it around 300-400 without being too concerned about it. But the interesting or the useful information I'm getting from here is the center of the dampness, and notice I'm also comparing it to the dampness outside. Now you're going to expect to get some degree of dampness outside, so I think this is a very good example of what is happening. You can see the salts crystallizing within the brickwork, and what's happening is dampness is in fact probably residual dampness is dissolving calcium sulfate salts from the pointing from the mortar bed. So these are calcium sulfate salts that are blistering underneath the paint. They come from the mortar. They're in cement, mortar, plaster. Calcium sulfate used to be known as gypsum. It, like any salts, it's crystallizing on the surface, and as it evaporates, the water evaporates, it crystallizes and breaks the external skin of paint, causing micro cracking. And you'll see if I just zoom in a bit, those little cracks there, micro cracks, which then become very absorbent. Here we see the color from the brick is coming through. It may be that there's also rust from nails. It's difficult to know here. It's particularly brown, but staining is associated with penetrating damp, as we'll see on the inside. This crack should be filled as well, as a matter of course. I doubt that's causing much ingress, but I'd say it's more the paint that's your problem, and it results from, I would say some stage you've got impermeable paint. Best thing to do is to wire brush it down to as much to brick as possible, and then paint with a coat of impermeable paint, and then keep it up to date every few years. Make sure you're not getting more of these, because if you do get dampness through, it doesn't matter what type of paint, if you get dampness on the other side, be it from damage to the roof or otherwise, then you're going to get moisture coming through, and you'll see that if we get over here, you're getting it here, so it's showing up particularly over there, but I suspect part of that is residual damp. It's difficult to know from whatever was wrong with your roof, which obviously I haven't seen before now. But it's the paint that's absorbing the moisture. It's completely different to the damp on the other side, and I'll show you what's causing that from an external point of view. It's damp-proof as slurry. So you've got French drains, which, if you listen to my last survey, there was a Frenchman who confirmed that French drains are absolutely nothing to do with France. Invention of Mr. French, and actually they cause more problems than they solve. Here you've got some water that's causing this plant to grow, and you've got moss. So at some stage there must have been a defect there, but I don't particularly see what it is. We can see some hygroscopic salts here. Hygroscopic salts are different to normal salts. They don't crystallize. It may have been the reason why the inside has been damp-proofed. I don't know what the cause of that is, but that has been what has caused or made worse the dampness on the inside, is past damp-proofing treatment. Yeah, well, I think the wall was already saturating. It was because the water was in the wall, but even so, the wall has to dry out before you paint it. I mean, in truth, I mean, I know it's nice to have white walls. In truth, it is better to keep them without paint, because then they just evaporate naturally.
Gotcha.
But inevitably, it's. I mean, you know, you can tell from that. So the flat roof appears to be repaired. It seems to be in order. I noticed one broken tile, but nothing major. So in addition, you have zones of heat loss in the dining room area, causing condensation. So condensation will form there and come down. And then condensation is forming along the ridge here, or the top of the wall.
I work in
Poor insulator, so you got more risk of condensation, and those look like condensation dribble marks, but by and large it's caused by penetrating damp. You can tell that because of the brown staining. So condensation can cause brown staining, interstitial condensation can, but this looks like penetrating damp, and on the outside you can see it. You've got mould down there, and when you've got mould, you know that you've got excess vapour internally, which lines up with all the condensation that we've seen. So, I mean, a simple thing is just open that up, and that will help. Yeah. Sometimes it's the simplest things that solve the problems, but bathroom extractor fan, keep it running, and I would recommend changing it for a continuous flow extractor fan. But you can do the same thing by just leaving the light on. Leave the light on for at least half an hour, possibly longer. Kitchen doesn't have an extractor fan. You can get around that by cooking with tops on pots and pans, and using a dehumidifier. But by and large, the kitchen isn't the biggest culprit. Drying clothes internally, you want to use a dehumidifier. I'll go and have a check out of the dehumidifier, but 20 litres per person per day.
Okay.
And then you've dropped the humidity to a dew point that's at the outside temperature, even in springtime and autumn. Those are condensation forms from mid-September through to April.
Yes.
It can actually be worse in those times of the year because people don't heat the property up at night, but at night can be really cold.
That's the thing, like we have this issue where we heat the room up, but then we wake up so groggy and sick, and every time we're just like, oh my god, we have to switch, because this room is really cold, like freezing cold. So we're trying to put it on, but then we wake up feeling terrible, so we're like, oh my god, switch it off. So it's a constant battle between.
But you've got extra risk. So apart from the fact that Victorian properties weren't particularly well insulated,
Right.
but this external room was the old outbuilding that's been internalised. So you're getting quite a lot of heat loss in here. I wouldn't be surprised if you don't get mould in there.
No, actually, I have to say, no.
Well, maybe it's been insulated. Who knows? But
Well, when we redid the wardrobe.
yeah.
But well, they didn't insulate the walls, I guess. But no, we don't get the. I mean, it's freezing cold when my husband gets his clothes out,
But not mould.
no mold, no.
Okay.
There are a few practical like.
So it's downstairs, and I'll have a look at the
Yeah.
dehumidifier. It's quite a small dehumidifier. It's, there's 12 litres. You basically need double the capacity.
Oh, wow.
I would get a different one, and you might as well have both of them going.
Yeah.
Put everything on video so that I don't have to repeat myself all
No,
the time.
of
I
course,
just put it
yeah.
on. And also so you can share it with your husband
Yeah.
and other people can see. But so this is damp here. Obviously the vent stopped working. The dehumidifier you use occasionally, but the risk is this is a solid. Well, even if it isn't necessarily solid, it acts as a solid floor. Tiles act like a solid floor. They're impermeable. Yes. You can sense the humidity in this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, in fact, sometimes I do turn it on, but because it's so humid, I tend not to switch it on often, and I bring it upstairs where I've got already heating on and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
I'll give you lots of recommendations, but you're going to get condensation forming on these, and because they can't absorb into it, it will go to the wall, which is here.
Right.
And so this is just standard condensation, as you have upstairs as well.
and then
You can see the condensation on that.
yeah, and then here as well, to show you this is where we keep our luggages.
Oh, you get mouldy, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really see it, but yeah, I'll go out. You can see that what happened, and I don't know if it's because of the painting that we used again. It's sort of like we exploded it.
Right, so that's sort of damp proofing, probably bitumen or something. I mean, ultimately the solution. So this is underground. You have a risk of moisture percolating down. Every cellar is.
By default, yeah.
You're going to get some rainwater down here, so you need ventilation. And the one thing is that if you put things a coating up against the wall, you're only blocking the damp. It can't evaporate out.
Yeah.
But it does look better. So a simple solution is to use thermal insulating plasterboard with insulation on it, and you can paint it and it looks good. It won't get rid of the water, but it'll just hide it basically.
Right.
And it will reduce the amount of insulation, the amount of condensation.
Yeah.
Sorry to use this rather crude illustration, but it's to demonstrate the way that vapour condenses behind a solid impermeable wall, such as damp-proof as slurry. It would also happen on a tiled wall as well, or even glass, such as a kitchen splashback. The water becomes trapped behind the damp-proof as slurry. It can't get out, and so it concentrates there. The concentration of water causes the salts, the calcium sulfate salts that are in the plaster and cement, to move to the surface and crystallize on the surface. You probably would not have a problem if it wasn't for the damp-proof as slurry, but ultimately the root cause is the insufficient ventilation from the bathroom, the kitchen, drying clothes, and to some degree respiration. The bathroom extractor fan, I understand, is not used all the time because it's noisy. One solution is to use a continuous flow bathroom extractor fan, which constantly blows air out but is quieter. The kitchen extractor fan isn't ducted out. Clothes are dried internally without a dehumidifier. And obviously you have some degree of respiration from working from home.